I still remember the sound of his voice, sharp, cold, final. I don't want to see your mother in this house again. I won't let her in next time. For a moment, everything stopped. My hands froze around the teacup I was holding. The steam between us faded, like the last bit of warmth leaving our marriage. My mother stood quietly by the door, clutching her purse like she was holding on to her dignity. Her eyes met mine, not angry, not pleading, just broken. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her silence screamed louder than he ever could. When she stepped outside, I swear the house went cold. He slammed the door shut behind her and muttered, "She's never respected me." I wanted to scream. You don't earn respect by humiliating someone. But I said nothing. I stood there, trapped between fear and shame, wondering when love had started feeling like this. The house looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. Every wall, every corner, seemed to echo his words. That day didn't just end a visit, it ended peace. And deep inside, something fragile began to crack. He thought it was over. He had no idea it had just begun. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him, pretending to rest, while his soft snores filled the room. Inside me, something had shattered beyond repair. I kept hearing his words. I won't let her in again. How could a man who once held my hand so gently speak with such cruelty about the woman who gave me life? I turned to look at him. His face looked peaceful, innocent even, as if he hadn't just destroyed the one bridge that connected my two worlds. And that's when I realized, love doesn't always die in fire. Sometimes it dies in silence. The next morning, I went to make breakfast like nothing happened. He kissed my forehead and said, "You know I only said that because I care about you." Care. That word used to mean safety. Now it felt like a cage. I nodded, smiled faintly and said, "I know." But inside, a storm had already started. For days, I convinced myself it was just anger, a moment of frustration. But every time I looked at the empty chair where my mother used to sit, I knew it wasn't a moment. It was the beginning of something darker. He thought he'd won, that his words would end the conflict. But he had no idea. His sentence didn't end the argument, it began the story. He thought those words would silence me. He had no idea they would destroy everything. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. It's strange how silence can sound louder than shouting. He acted as if nothing had happened. He'd laugh at the TV, talk about work, ask what I wanted for dinner. And I played along, smiled when he smiled, nodded when he spoke. But inside, something had changed. I began to notice things I hadn't before. How he always double-checked my phone. How he started controlling the grocery money, saying it was for better budgeting. How he'd ask who I was talking to, even when it was just a friend. It felt like I was living under soft surveillance. Invisible bars, no chains, but no freedom either. One evening, I tried to talk to him about it. "Do you think maybe you're being a little controlling?" I asked gently. He chuckled, took my hand and said, "I just love you too much. That's all." But the way he held my wrist, a little too tight, a little too long, said otherwise. Later that night, I looked at our wedding photo on the shelf. The girl in that picture looked happy, glowing in love. I didn't recognize her anymore. That smile didn't belong to me now. Sometimes I'd walk around the house and feel like a guest in my own home. Every wall looked familiar, yet distant, like the memory of a place I once loved. People think houses crack because of storms. Sometimes they break from the quiet. One morning, I woke up to find my phone missing. When I asked him, he said, "I just checked it. You get too many calls from unknown numbers." I tried to laugh it off, but a chill ran down my spine. He started showing up at my workplace unannounced. Sometimes with lunch, sometimes with excuses. Once, he even argued with my manager because he thought my shift ended too late. That day I realized, this wasn't love anymore. This was control dressed up as concern. At night, I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, tracing cracks with my eyes. Each one felt like a reflection of my marriage. Fragile, spreading, unstoppable. Flashbacks of happier times would haunt me. His laughter, our road trips, the promises we made. He wasn't always this way. Maybe he changed. Or maybe I was just too blind to see him clearly before. I started keeping a small notebook, hidden under the kitchen drawer. I wrote everything he said, everything he did. Not because I planned revenge. Not yet. But because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. He thought he still had control. He didn't realize that with every cruel word, every forced smile, I was slowly learning how to disappear from him. Piece by piece. He built walls around me to keep me his. He didn't know I'd learned to escape through the cracks. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant, like someone unsure if they were still welcome. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't need to check. I knew it was her. When I opened the door, my mother stood there, holding a small box of sweets, the kind she used to bring when I was little. Her eyes searched mine, silently asking, "Is it safe to come in?" I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see him standing behind me. He wasn't home. For once, the house was quiet, like it was holding its breath. "Come in," I whispered. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room carefully. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. Not a cushion out of place, not a glass unwashed. The kind of perfection that only fear can create. We sat on the couch. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She smiled faintly and said, "You look tired." I forced a laugh. "I'm fine, Mom." But my voice cracked on the last word. She reached out, took my hand and said softly, "Sweetheart." When I left that day, I promised myself I wouldn't come back unless you needed me. But I can see now you do. Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to say everything, the control, the fear, the loneliness, but words got trapped in my throat. So I just nodded. That's when she said something that still echoes in my mind. "If love makes you small, it isn't love. It's a cage." We talked for an hour, or maybe more. Time felt strange that day, like it was slowing down just to let us break quietly. She asked if I was happy. I wanted to say yes. I really did. But lies don't sound convincing when your heart has already confessed the truth. So instead I said, "He's trying." She looked at me, her eyes full of the kind of love that sees through everything. "No, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're the one trying." The silence after that was heavy. We both knew what she was saying. Leave him, before he breaks you completely. But I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. When she got up to go, she hugged me tightly. Her hands trembled as she whispered in my ear, "I'll always be here, even if you can't see me." I didn't know those would be her last words to me. I watched her walk to the gate, her figure getting smaller with each step, like a chapter closing before I was ready to finish reading. When I turned back inside, the house looked darker somehow. The air felt heavier, colder. I didn't realize it then, but I had just witnessed the beginning of my own unraveling. That was the last time I saw her alive. It was a quiet Sunday morning. He was still asleep beside me, breathing heavily, the way he always did when he had nothing to worry about. I sat by the window, staring at the street below, trying to convince myself that life was normal. The phone rang once. Then again. I ignored it. But the third ring, it didn't stop. I picked it up, whispering, "Hello." There was a pause. Then a trembling voice said, "Is this Mrs. Carter?" Something inside me froze. "Yes," I said cautiously. The voice hesitated before speaking again. "I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. Your mother." That's all I remember before the words blurred into noise. The phone slipped from my hand. For a second, the world lost sound. Everything went silent, like life had hit pause. He woke up irritated. "What's wrong with you now?" I couldn't speak. My lips trembled. He grabbed the phone, listened for a moment, then sighed and said coldly, "She's gone." I nodded. He rolled his eyes, threw the phone on the bed and muttered, "Well, people die. You should get used to it." And just like that, the last light inside me flickered out. The man who promised to protect me couldn't even offer a simple sorry. That was the day I stopped crying and started changing. At the funeral, everyone whispered condolences that felt rehearsed. But he stood beside me, arms crossed, impatience written all over his face. When I started to cry, he leaned closer and whispered, "Don't make a scene." Those 3 words were heavier than the coffin in front of me. As they lowered her into the ground, I realized the only person who ever loved me for who I was now gone. When everyone left, I stayed behind. I knelt beside her grave, tracing her name with my fingers, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom. You were right. This isn't love." A cold wind blew through the trees, and I swear I heard her voice again. "If love makes you small, it's a cage." I stood up, something shifting deep inside me. The tears stopped. My hands stopped trembling. I felt hollow but aware. That night, I went home, walked past him without a word, and locked myself in the bathroom. I looked at my reflection, swollen eyes, lifeless face, but behind that something new was forming. It wasn't rage yet. It was realization that I had spent years begging for the kind of love that was never coming. And that realization was the first crack of thunder before the storm I was about to become. She died quietly, but her death woke up the loudest part of me. For days, I moved through the house like a ghost. He didn't notice. Or maybe 04083 did, and enjoyed it. His laughter filled the rooms where my mother's voice used to echo in memory. Every sound became a reminder of how trapped I was. But something inside me had changed. Grief no longer hurt, it sharpened. Each tear turned into a thought, each thought into a weapon. I started paying attention to his routines, his calls, his late nights, his excuses. The lies that once confused me now revealed a pattern. A name I didn't know kept flashing on his phone. At first, I told myself not to look. But curiosity isn't what killed my innocence, truth did. I searched quietly, without confrontation. And what I found didn't surprise me. There was another woman. Younger. Louder. Easier to control. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in the dark, staring at him as he slept. His face peaceful, like a man who thought he was untouchable. And in that silence, I whispered to myself, "You made me small. But you forgot what happens when small things grow teeth." It was no longer about love or forgiveness. It was about taking back what he stole. My dignity, my power, and the part of me he thought was dead. The next morning, I smiled for the first time in weeks. He noticed. "You're in a good mood," he said suspiciously. I just nodded, replying softly, "I'm learning to move on." He didn't know I had already begun. While he worked late, I started collecting documents, bank details, messages, anything that proved what he'd done. Every click, every screenshot felt like another piece of my soul coming back to life. During the day, I acted normal. I cooked, cleaned, even laughed at his jokes. But behind every smile was a plan forming. Slow, careful, perfect. Late at night, I'd talk to my mother's picture. "You told me pain teaches us what we deserve. Now I know, I deserve peace, and he deserves to lose everything." By the end of that week, I had enough evidence to destroy him. But revenge wasn't going to be loud. No, it was going to be quiet, elegant, and final. I looked at him one evening as he bragged about his business deals, and thought to myself, "You think you own this house. You think you own me. But soon, you'll learn what it feels like to lose control." And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because I had control over him, but because he no longer had control over me. The storm wasn't around me anymore. It was inside me, and it had finally found its direction. I learned early on that the world believes what it sees. So I gave it a picture-perfect life. Every morning I fixed my hair the same way. Soft waves, a light brush of makeup, the practiced smile that says everything is okay. I dressed in the kind of clothes that read, "Put together." Not too sharp, never too flashy. A wife who has it all under control. Neighbors waved in the hall. Colleagues asked about projects. He praised my dinners and posted pictures of our happy family, as if he were proud to be the leading man. But the smile was a mask. Behind it, I cataloged moments. The way he flinched when his phone buzzed, the casual cruelty he tossed my mother like garbage, the nights I lay awake mapping his every habit. People clapped at the picture on their feeds, unaware of the edits between the frames. I perfected small performances. I swatted at jokes that crossed lines. I laughed too loudly at the guests' compliments. I let him steer conversations when visitors came because the less he noticed, the more I could work. At home, I performed affection, light touches, easy laughter, until the act became muscle memory. The more I gave them what they wanted, the less they looked for proof. It was exhausting and brilliant. Exhausting because every moment felt like acting. Brilliant because it bought me time, space, and above all, invisibility. In that invisibility, I hatched plans. I downloaded statements and took pictures of receipts. I recorded conversations where his words betrayed him. The mask made him careless. And carelessness leaves traces. If you want to hide a storm, tuck it behind a calm sky. By day I was the picture of composure. By night I turned detective. I set up a folder on my laptop labeled important, then buried it under innocuous files, recipes, home invoices, vacation photos. The folder was a map, bank transfers, screenshots of late-night messages, recordings where his tone shifted from charming to cold. I learned passwords from old notes he left open. I learned how to move through his life without being seen. I started small. I shifted a joint account's automatic bill to a secondary card in my name. I transferred a modest sum to an account only I could access. Not to vanish, but to be ready. The lawyer I met with wasn't a secret hobby. She was a lifeline. We talked strategy in hushed coffee shop corners. She explained my options: documentation, custody, civil protection. Her questions sharpened my resolve. There were nights I felt like an actor in two plays at once. One show for the world, another for myself. I'd stand in the kitchen and set 2 plates, smiling as he praised my roast, then slip to the computer afterward to compile evidence. The house smelled like rosemary and deception. If you're listening and you've ever felt trapped behind someone else's version of your life, what would you do? Comment below, share your story. If you're still here, subscribe. There are more nights like this. My strategy was quiet, because noise attracts attention. I didn't want drama, I wanted certainty. Each move was deliberate, legal, immovable. I didn't seek humiliation. I wanted boundaries returned and truth exposed. When the time came to act, it wouldn't be a spectacle. It would be irreversible. Masks hide faces, but they also hide strategy. And strategy wins when patience keeps watch. It started on a Thursday, the day he thought he owned everything. He came home with that familiar swagger, tossing his jacket on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I had dinner waiting. Candlelight. Music. A perfect scene, or so he thought. He didn't know the lawyer's office had already received my documents. Didn't know the account he used to fund his business meetings was now frozen. Didn't know his messages, the ones he deleted, were already printed, signed, and sealed in a manila envelope sitting in my purse. I watched him eat, fork by fork, unaware that every bite was a countdown. Then the phone rang. He answered casually, and froze. His face turned pale, the kind of white that only comes when lies start to catch up. I heard fragments. Investigation, unauthorized withdrawals, recorded calls. When he hung up, his voice cracked. What did you do? I smiled, soft, controlled. Nothing. Just told the truth. He slammed his fist on the table. You ruined me. I stood up slowly, eyes steady. No. You ruined yourself the day you thought I was too weak to fight back. Silence. For the first time, he had no words. When someone builds a kingdom out of lies, you don't need to burn it down. You just stop believing in it, and it collapses on its own. The days that followed were chaos, but not mine. His phone buzzed nonstop with calls from the bank, his partners, his lawyer. The arrogance that once filled his eyes was replaced by panic. He didn't shout anymore. He begged. He stood in the kitchen one morning, voice trembling. I need your help. Just one last chance. I looked at him, the same man who had laughed when my mother died, and said quietly, this is your last chance to leave. He didn't understand, until he saw the packed suitcase by the door. I had already transferred the lease, closed the joint account, and filed for divorce. Every step was planned, every signature pre-written. He dropped to his knees muttering, please, I can change. But his voice didn't move me. It sounded rehearsed, like every apology before. I took one last look at him, the man who once made me doubt my worth, and realized something powerful. I didn't need revenge anymore. He was already living it. His empire was gone. His pride shattered. And me? I was free, finally, painfully free. Some endings don't explode. They just fade quietly. leaving behind the sound of a man losing everything he thought he owned. The morning after he left, the silence felt strange. No footsteps echoing through the hall, no angry muttering, no slammed doors. For the first time in years, the house was still, not empty, just peaceful. I made coffee and stood by the same window where I once cried, watching sunlight spill across the floorboards. The air smelled different, like freedom. There were bills to handle, documents to sign, a life to rebuild. But I didn't feel scared. I felt capable. Every scar, every sleepless night had become proof that I could survive anything. I started working again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to build something of my own, small, quiet, real. Sometimes people asked, "Do you regret it? Leaving?" And I'd smile and say, "You don't regret walking out of a fire when you realize you were burning." He tried calling once. I didn't answer. I didn't need closure. I already had it. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying him. It was watching myself rise without hate, knowing he would have to live with the memory of the woman he underestimated. When you finally stop waiting for someone to change, you realize you've already changed enough for both of you. It took time to rediscover who I was without him. The world felt louder, colors brighter, even the air tasted different. Freedom wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, steady, and deeply personal. I redecorated the house, not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. Every plant, every photo, every sound became a piece of me. The walls that once witnessed my silence now echoed laughter again, mine. I learned new things: gardening, painting, driving alone at night with the windows down. Simple acts that felt like declarations of independence. Some nights I still thought about my mother. Her voice whispered through the quiet, "You kept your promise, my girl. You didn't just survive. You healed." And she was right. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about forgiving yourself for staying too long and being brave enough to leave when you finally see the truth. If you're still watching, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed or walked away sooner? Let me know below. And if you've ever survived something like this, remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, in a deep breath, an open door, and the first morning you no longer look over your shoulder. Sometimes I replay it all, not out of regret, but to remind myself how far I've come. The girl I was, she thought love meant endurance, that staying quiet meant peace. Now I know silence can be the cruelest kind of prison. When I think about him now, I don't feel hate. I feel distance. The kind that turns sharp memories into soft echoes. There are nights when I still dream of the house. The arguments, the slammed doors, the things I never said. But in those dreams, I'm not trapped anymore. I'm walking out the front door, barefoot, sunlight on my face. And my mother's voice, always calm, always certain, whispers, "You made it out." Sometimes people ask me, "Do you ever miss him?" And I tell them, you can't miss someone who never really saw you. Forgiveness came later. Not for him, but for myself. For the years I wasted thinking I had to be small to be loved. For the days I blamed myself for his cruelty. And for the silence I kept while he was breaking me. Now silence is my peace, not his control. Every morning I wake up, make my coffee and smile. Not because life is perfect, but because it's mine. The strongest revenge isn't payback. It's rebuilding your life so beautifully that the person who tried to destroy it fades into irrelevance. To anyone still listening, maybe you've felt the same kind of cage. Maybe you've loved someone who used your kindness as leverage. Maybe you've been told that leaving makes you selfish. Let me tell you something. Leaving isn't weakness. It's faith in yourself, in your worth, in the life waiting beyond the fear. You don't have to shatter everything overnight. You don't have to scream, or prove, or explain. Sometimes freedom starts with a single, quiet no. The woman I am now doesn't seek applause. She doesn't need validation. She only seeks peace, and gives herself permission to rest without guilt. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking through this story with me. I hope, somewhere between my words, you found the courage to start writing your own. Because every ending, even one born from pain, is just a doorway to something new. He thought he took everything from me, But what he really gave me was the chance to begin again. And that's the truth I carry now. Not bitterness, not sorrow, just the quiet power of a woman who finally remembered who she was. If this story touched you, share it. You never know who might need to hear it tonight. And if you're still here, subscribe, because the next story might be yours.